How's it going, man?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I just want to say thank you for getting Kiss into the Hall of Fame because they were my first concert too. But another band I think that should get in as soon as possible is Scorpions because their drummer died this year. I mean, one of their drummers, and Klaus had spinal surgery, and Matthias broke his hand and leg, and they're celebrating their 60th anniversary, and they're not going to get young anytime soon. So, not to tell you, I think you want to agree that they have to get in.
Of course. I mean, who passed away? Who passed away?
James Kotak.
Oh,
so you're talking about much later in the band's career. Cal, so this is where, for me, the global question comes in. Because, again, when you look, you say a band like Scorpions in America, and the immediate thought is, oh yeah, Rock You Like a Hurricane, big song, and then the next thing might be like 80s hair band or whatever.
Winds of Change, maybe,
The reality is Scorpions started in the 60s and had a huge career before they broke in America. Globally, Scorpions are sacred around the world, more so than in America. So that's why I always wonder if the global perspective is represented, because you look at some of these bands, you can't look at just America if you're looking at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a global institution.
The one thing that I will sort of try to dispel about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that people get chuffed up about is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has always not just been about rock and roll. People are like, well, that was NWA is not a rock band. They should that's not the point. It's like it's youth. It's music that is connected with youth, and then celebrating that. It has the name the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because I don't know, because it's sexy or whatever. But that's never been a criteria that it has to be rock. People get all they lose their minds because they're acts or singers or whatever. They're not rock and roll. I think that it should be, much like the Baseball Hall of Fame, where there are pitchers and there are batters and there are relief pitchers. There's a lot of different ways to be great at baseball. There's a lot of different ways to be great at the broader intent of rock and roll.
Scorpions don't have a shot.
Scorpions don't have a shot. I love Scorpions. I mean, I would.
Me too.
Tomorrow, if it was up to me, if you and I ran, I'd put it. Scorpions don't have a shot.
Me too.
There's an element. It's the same vibe. Well, Scorpions certainly didn't have anywhere near the cultural impact that Kiss had in the United States. But there is a stigma to some of these metal bands, which is not always undeserved. We talk about this at the Rainbow. Like you and I will disagree about some of the bands on your next cruise, band 15 on your next cruise, which you're going to be lobbying for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Which I'm like, Trunk, we got to draw the line somewhere.
But I'm very, very realistic about it. I really am. Ray in California. Go ahead, Ray.
Hi, Tom. I was curious what we should know about the work you did for that last Chuck Berry album.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that was what an honor to be asked to play on Chuck Berry's record. I didn't get to meet Chuck in person. He was not sort of doing co-studio sessions at the time, but he reached out, and I'm honestly not certain how familiar he was with my work, but it was important for him and his people to have me on the record. And I just, what do you do when you play on a song with Chuck Berry? Honestly, I'm not going to do a bunch of whammy pedal craziness that would. So I just did my best to kind of, honor the artist and kind of genuflect and go thank you for creating rock and roll, and it's an honor to be, acolyte number 4071.
But you never met him.
Never met him.
You spoke to him though?
No.
Oh, okay. So
he was. I don't know how well he was by the time that was going around.
Right. All right, Ray, you good?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray in Maryland is joining us now. Go ahead, Ray.
Hey, thanks, Eddie. Hey, Tom, how you doing, brother?
What's going on, Ray? How you?
Not much, man. I got to see you play live a handful of times with Rage. I regretfully never got to see Audio Slave. I did, however, get to see Chris with Soundgarden a handful of times as well. But my question for you, Tom, is you have cited your biggest guitar influences. You know, you've pointed out Randy Rhoads, Eddie Van Halen, you know, two of the greatest ever. What was the process and/or transition to where you are the most unique guitar player I think I've ever heard, and I don't even think it could be duplicated. What got from those influences and what took you to what you became? I mean,
great question, Ray, because you don't sound like the people who influenced you.
Right.
And you're very identifiable, which is a mark of a great player.
Yeah, well, first, I didn't start playing guitar until I was 17 years old. I had only heard of one other guitar player ever, famous guitar player that had started that made records, and that was Robert Johnson. He had to sell his soul to the devil to do it. So I was
the old blues guy,
yeah, exactly. Given my Catholic upbringing, I wasn't about to do that. So I just practiced my ass off.
Sold it to Jimmy Page.
And those, and those were, I mean, the Randy Rhoads poster was the poster on my wall when I was practicing 8 hours a day, right? So I amassed all this technique like you would when you're practicing Eddie Van Halen and all that. But when you start playing guitar, you play guitar because you like other guitar players, and you consider good guitar playing to be guitar playing that sounds like the people that you love. So that's what I was trying to do. Then I even got into Yngwie World for a minute and Steve Vai World and all that. And it really was only at the beginning of Rage Against the Machine where I started to find my own sound. I had dabbled with, my poor college roommate who was like a fan of like opera and stuff, and I'm playing like Bark at the Moon and Grim Reaper in my room.
Imagine not being at Harvard at the time.
Yeah, we made it. I went to the Ozzy show when Motley Crue opened for them, and we made a sign that said Harvard barks at the moon. Very, very, very popular on the subway after that. But I remember I was in my room, and I at the time everybody had the Eddie Van Halen guitar, which is the one knob with volume, right? That was like the coolest guitar. I was saddled with a Gibson Explorer that had a bunch of knobs, a bunch of useless knobs, as it turned out, aesthetically not pleasing. But it had a toggle switch on it, right? And so one day I had my wah-wah pedal, and I was I turned one of the volumes down to 0 and the other one up to 10. Was sort of toggling between with the wah-wah pedal, and my roommate, who just was so tired of hearing me in my Marshall half stack in our little room, was like, "Did you get a fucking keyboard too, dude?" And I was like, "Did that sound like a keyboard to you? Did that sound interesting?" So I put that in my back pocket. Still practicing 8 hours a day, like all the shredding and the scales and whatnot. And then there was a very early Rage Against the Machine gig where we were opening up for 2 cover bands at a college out in the valley, and each of those cover bands had like a technical wizard on guitar, right? Like someone masterful. And I was like, if I'm going to be the third jackass playing, blazing Phrygian scales on this useless gig on a week afternoon there, I'm going to get off that hamster wheel. So what I started practicing were the eccentricities in my playing. I started practicing the mistakes. I was practicing 8 hours a day with the toggle switch. And all of a sudden, there was like sounds and textures, and I was like, rather than listening to Steve Vai and trying to sound like him, I was listening to a police helicopter and trying to sound like that. Rather than listening to like Eruption and trying to play that, I would go to the LA Zoo and like try to sound like lions, and I was like Old MacDonald had a farm on the guitar, and then that lane was completely open. So when I started identifying as like the DJ in Rage Against the Machine, meaning I could draw samples played with analog with my hands and a Marshall amp, but I could like. Here's the thing: if you want to sound like Eddie Van Halen, listen to Eddie Van Halen. If you want to sound different, try to sound like a duck.